Our reading is from Rays of the One Light, Weekly Commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda. Our topic is Deeds versus Intentions. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. Jesus Christ emphasized repeatedly the spirit, not the letter of the law. In chapter 5 of the Gospel of St. Matthew, he speaks of the sin of killing and of the legal punishment attendant on that sin, but says that more important than the act is the desire to kill or to do harm. He shows that the sin of harmful desire goes beyond merely wanting to kill. My message to you, he said, is this: whoever is angry with his brother without cause already stands condemned. Whoever contemptuously calls his brother a fool shall answer for it to the Supreme Council. And whoever calls his brother an outcast of God shall be in danger of hellfire. Brother here means any other human being. For all of us, in the highest sense, are brothers and sisters, children of our one Father, Mother, God. The true self of one is the self of all. To hurt another is, even if one doesn't realize it, to hurt oneself. Swami Kriyananda in The Path recalls an episode in which the Master, Paramahansa Yogananda, revealed his sense of identity, even with the plants. One day, Kriyananda wrote, we were moving a delicate but rather heavy tropical plant into position on the hillside. Our handling, evidently, was too rough, for Master cried out, "Be careful what you are doing. Can't you feel? It's alive." To wish death to anyone, to wish even harm to another creature, is to deny in oneself the reality of that divine life of which all of us are manifestations. It is, in short, to deny the eternal truth proclaimed by in the Bhagavad Gita in the 2nd chapter. The self is never born, nor does it perish. Once existing, it cannot ever cease to be. It is birthless, eternal, changeless, ever itself. It is not slain when the body is slain. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Good morning, everyone. It has been a pleasure being up this weekend to see so many old friends and to meet new ones. And when away from people for a long time and then reconnecting with them, I'm always reminded of how permanent friendship and love are, even if you don't know the latest news or what people have gone through or what they're experiencing now. You sort of meet them where you left them, in a sense, that friendship is eternal. So probably most of you know that what I was doing this weekend was giving presentations on the intersections of science and spirituality. I gave a talk at East West Books and then a longer program here yesterday morning. But I thought I wouldn't let you all get away with not hearing some more science. So there is a fascinating discovery that was made. It was actually predicted by Einstein and 2 other collaborators, that physical objects could become entangled. And then we've probably all heard about entanglement a great deal ever since that time, because it is a curious phenomenon. basically how they have experimentally shown that particles can become entangled is by splitting a single photon. A photon is the particle form of light. And they figured out ways to split a single photon, which is at a high energy, into two slightly lower energy photons. And in the process of splitting them, send them traveling in opposite directions. And they become twins. They're not identical twins, they're opposite twins. So whatever one property one has, the other will have the opposite property. So if it's electrical charge, if it's spin, there's a number of complementary properties that all matter has. And this was a novel notion that then became a real crisis, in a sense, for physics, and especially for the world of those who study relativity, Einstein's theory of general relativity. Because what can happen once these particles are twinned, once the photons are traveling in opposite directions, is that if you measure one of them, the other one will always have the opposite property, even though they're traveling away from each other at the speed of light. And in fact, they've done many, many experiments which their experimental apparatus has allowed them to get farther and farther and farther apart. And they've now measured them several miles apart, measured one, measured the other instantaneously after they measure the first one. And they're always opposite properties. So the dilemma for physicists has been, well, you know the old joke about the thermos? One person said, thermoses are amazing. You put hot things in it and it stays hot. You put cold things in it, it stays cold. How do it know? So for physicists, the question was, well, how does that other particle know what property this first particle took on when it was measured? And when they get really, really far apart, and theoretically as far apart as one side of the universe to the other, they seemingly are sending information faster than the speed of light, which, according to Einstein's theory, is impossible. Nothing can travel faster than the speed of light, including information. So entanglement has been one of those collection of things known as quantum weirdness. And there's been various ways to understand it. But for the classical physicists, for the relativity physicists, it remains a difficulty, it remains a problem. But quantum physicists see it in a different light. They see it as an expression of wave-particle duality. And this is a very cool feature in terms of its intersections with spirituality of the physical plane. And that is that everything that exists can exist either as a wave or as a particle. Light we think of as a wave, but it also exists in its particle form as photons. But more confuting to the rational mind is that atoms, which we think of as matter, can exist as waves. And all of these things take on a behavior of matter, the particle form, when somebody is around to observe them. Otherwise, they just hang out in wave form, in their energy form. So it's a really cool aspect of the reality that we're in. It just kind of continues, but it's not visible to the senses. But of course, the moment you observe it through the senses, there it is. So it literally pops into the behavior of matter. So this is not what we expect from our world, right? We expect enduring behavior from matter. but it doesn't really have it. In the mid-20th century, there was a pioneering physicist named David Bohm who had an explanation that put this wave-particle duality together with entanglement, and he proved mathematically that everything that exists is interconnected. And he wrote a book called Wholeness and the Implicate Order. And the wholeness part was, again, sort of contrary to how we think about things, was actually proven mathematically that nothing can be separate from anything else. It's impossible for anything to be separate from anything else. And the way he explained it, which gives us some way to kind of visualize it, is that everything that is existing in its wave form before it's observed exists in a realm that he called pre-space, which is also referred to as non-locality, which is a realm of potential, a realm of pure energy, in which all of creation exists continuously, but manifests as matter when it's observed. And that manifestation of matter is still connected to that realm. So, using a terrestrial analogy, matter is like an island that's still connected to the earth beneath the ocean. There is no island truly separate from everything else. Everything is connected. It's interconnected with the ocean of energy that he called pre-space. But he went on to say, basically, even though in these experiments where they have deliberately created this specific entanglement of two photons, the reality is that we're all entangled. That all matter is entangled with all other matter. And that all people are entangled with all other people. So we're always joined. And it literally is impossible to do harm to another without doing harm to yourself. It's not just a sentiment. That anything we do in a harmful way will have ultimately harm to all, and anything that others do will have harm to us because we are interconnected. So why don't we see this? Why don't we know this for ourselves from our own personal experience? And the reason is, as Yogananda explained it, that we are all in our experience of reality, waves of awareness. I love this notion that we are not any of these things we identify with. We're just a wave of consciousness that has a limited awareness. And we're choosing that limited amount of awareness. It's not inherent to us. It's not our true potential of awareness, but for many, many reasons, karma, intensity of interest, Maya, we have limited our awareness to pretty much what we can experience through the senses and through our bodies. But that's not really who we are. It's just a temporary identification. So in reality, according to Yogananda, to the great masters, to the physicists, we are all those things interconnected, but we're only looking at a very tiny expression that is behaving as matter, and that's our physical form. We're also mostly only aware of what we feel rather than what anybody else is feeling. So one way to think, I always like to try to start with the science and move it into the spiritual teachings. In a way, you could say the entire spiritual path is the process of expanding our wave of awareness. And to, not in intellectual theory, knowing that everything is connected, but in actual awareness that we know everyone is connected, that we feel ourselves as much in others as we feel in ourselves. There's a great story that, Ananda tells in the New Path, that he was walking with Yogananda, walking with Master, and he was surprised that Master was leaning on him increasingly more as they walked. And then he turned to him and said, "When you're in as many bodies as I am, it's hard to remember which one to keep moving." So that is the genuine awareness, not just the intellectual acceptance of that connection. He really felt himself in all bodies and in all people. So how do we expand it? This is really the life process we're all in when we embrace spiritual teachings. Is how do we become more aware, continuously expanding that awareness? The most important way is meditation. In meditation, in going into stillness and becoming absorbed within, you can begin to directly feel and experience something more than you normally do. And it's not anything that you're making up. It's a genuine, direct experience that no one can talk you out of. When you have that experience of a greater expansion of feeling or love or energy coursing through you, or your body losing its sort of tight focus that you normally have on it, it's very genuine, it's very powerful. And you realize, I am more than I think. I am more than I'm typically aware of. This is the number one job for all of us as spiritual seekers, is to have that direct experience. But there's also the reality that we live lives of activity, and that we need to try to, if possible, continue to expand our awareness even in our everyday activities, and to be able to, in a real way, feel our connection to others. And what pretty much all spiritual paths say is the best way to do that is to think of everything you're doing and try to consciously make everything you're doing service. Now, for a lot of years, I have to say, whenever I would hear that, I would think, okay, I guess I have to do it. I have to grimly serve. You know, I got to give up everything I want or everything I'm interested in, and I just have to serve people. You can imagine it wasn't a very inviting thought. But I think it's a common thought when you first encounter this notion that you should have a life of service. It sounds maybe not very rewarding, or that it's drastic, that to really serve, you have to sell everything, book the next ticket to Afghanistan and work with the refugees there. Otherwise, you're not really serving. You're not really doing what you're being asked or being advised by the saints and sages. But in fact, service is more of an attitude than an action. It's more of how you do what you do than what specifically you're doing. And service starts with the person nearest to you. There's a story of a woman who came to see Mother Teresa, and she was, a devout follower of her, loved her, and just wanted to serve. But before she asked Mother Teresa how she could serve, and was asking her to, bring her to India and let her serve with her, she had also told her about difficulty she was having with her son, and was asking for Mother Teresa's blessings to help her son. So then once she asked Mother Teresa if she could come to India and serve, she said, no, start with your son. You should be serving your son. Don't expect some other blessing to come out of nowhere to take care of your son. You are that blessing. You are that channel. Work to help him, and that is your divine service, just as great as working with the poor or the sick or the dying in India. So service starts with wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and with whoever you are with. And this kind of loops us back to my beginning, is that we are indeed all entangled. But we can feel that entanglement more specifically when we interact with people. So not only are we entangled for the good stuff, we're entangled for the bad stuff as well. So if you have a disagreement with someone, you remain entangled in that disagreement, no matter if they go away, go far away. You're still vibrating in some resonant way, in some entangled way with that other person. And so if you were the one who started the dispute, you are the one who has created the harm, but ironically, the harm stays with you. And until you can reconcile that, or shift your consciousness in prayer and bless them and ask for forgiveness, you will remain entangled in that dispute, in that difficulty. Anybody who's married knows this one, right? You just carry it around if there's a disagreement with your loved one. But on the other hand, you can also be entangled in wonderful stuff. And I came across a passage in one of the Wisdom of Yogananda books that I really liked, because it brought into a kind of simple focus for me of the best way to think about serving. And it was, learn how to find pleasure in making others happy. So, I was sold. Pleasure. Hey. This can be pleasure. It's not grim service. It's not me always having to be the one who's selfless and, doing the right thing. It's flipping it around and say, learn that service is pleasure. Learn that service has an immediate and real and obvious benefit and blessing. So instead of being entangled when you've had a disagreement with someone, get entangled by having done something thoughtfully or just even casually that makes that person happy. It can be perfect strangers. Yogananda talked about be a smile millionaire. When you see a perfect stranger, smile. And what you will have done, even if they don't actually smile, is they'll smile inside. And now you're entangled in a smile. You're entangled in all that conveys, is goodwill, the offer of friendship if something should go further. It is a feeling in which you then exist. That's the feeling you become aware of. It's in traffic. You can let the other guy in. You can be kind. You can be thoughtful in anything you're doing. But then with your coworkers, with your colleagues, with those whom you have close relationships, you can put even more thought into it. And to do these kind of kindnesses that you know they will respond to, that you know will actually make them happy, becomes a pleasure. But it also does something very, very important, which is it expands our awareness. It's our long-term job, is to become more aware until we become infinitely aware once again. So every time you make that real connection, every time you entangle with someone in service and make them feel happy, you feel happy. So it's not, as the photons, opposite twins, they're identical twins. You are actually having the same feeling. There's a lot of research done about when groups of people spend any amount of time together, that they start mirroring posture, the way they stand or the way they sit or the way they hold their bodies. And it's often explained in a very sort of reductive way, which is, you just subconsciously see them sit one way, so you see them sit that way. I think it's that you've become entangled, and you're all beginning to share a similar kind of awareness. And when you share a similar kind of awareness or feeling, you sit the same way naturally, not because your subconscious is saying, well, he's leaning back, you should lean back. It just comes. Any state of consciousness will naturally express through the physical instrument in sympathy to that state of consciousness. So when we gather, and when we have a gathering like this, we're all entangling. We're all taking whatever feeling that we're gaining together, and we take it with us. And it is something that perhaps is not dramatically expansive, but over time, if you're more aware, deliberately aware, you're deliberately kind, you're deliberately thoughtful, you deliberately try to make people happy, you will find that your happiness has expanded and that it has nothing to do with anything outside yourself. That happiness, that feeling of love, that feeling of pleasure in making someone else happy remains regardless of what's going on otherwise in your life. So, entangle to your heart's delight with as many people as you can that you bump into that are just the person next to you. You don't want to go overboard. There's a funny joke about, they sent out the Voyager 1, I think it was, that has this plaque on it that shows what humans look like anatomically, and then it also has a solid gold record in it that basically is trying to tell any alien who finds this, who we are and what kind of things we do. And part of it is to welcome them to come visit us. So the joke that I heard the other day was, it's probably not a good idea to send naked pictures to aliens and ask them to come visit you. So you can take this, the person next to you needs to be loved by you, too far, and people start backing away rather than getting entangled in a warm, nice feeling. So keep it in balance, but remember that even small things, if you're genuine with them, will awaken some happiness in them and then awaken it in you. So, God bless.
Let me feel that thou and I are one. When the sparks of cosmic creation flew from under thy crucible of love, I danced with all the lights that heralded the coming of the myriad worlds. I am a little spark of thy joyous cosmic fire. O thou Son of Life, as thy nectar poured into the little cups of human minds filled with molten liquid of vital sparks, they thought to contain thy golden infinity in the smallness of their human feelings. In each fragile, undulating mirror of human flesh, I see reflected thy restless dance of omnipresent power. In the lambent waters of life, I behold thy ever-steady, almighty life. Teach me, Christ-like, by the power of concentration, to still the restless storms of desire raging on the lake of my mind. Stilling those waters, I lovingly behold thy unruffled face of cosmic stillness. Cause the little wave of my life to subside, that thy consciousness in me spread out to become thine own vastness. Let me feel my heart throbbing in thy breast, my feet moving with thy energy, thy breath breathing through mine, thy energy actively moving in my arms, thy thoughts weaving all the thoughts in my brain. When I cry, thy soft sigh within me wakens me to thy joy. In thy playfulness, little bubble visions of thy creation float dancingly in the chamber of my dreams, which manifest in my sleep of delusion. Thy meteoric will courses through the skies of my own will power. Make me feel that it is thou who art I. Oh, make me thyself, that I behold my little bubble of self ever floating in thee.